Hi, I'm Dr. Dinah Hill. Thank you so much for joining me with Your Life in Process. And if you want more, if you're interested in applying these processes to your daily life, join me at my membership, More Life in Process. At More Life in Process, you will get meditations for you to practice at home. You'll get extra bits from the episode that maybe got recorded after the fact. You're going to get PDFs and handouts, things that you can use to apply your daily practice to your life. And I can't wait to see you there. $5 a month, $50 for the year. You can go to yourlifeinprocess.com to sign up. Hi. It's been a while since I've seen you.
I know.
A few months. Yeah.
From seeing each other every day to not at all. But I've been following you on Instagram.
Oh, well, it's not seeing all of me, but yes, seeing a part, seeing the slice. Yeah,
for sure.
You didn't see the 5 loads of laundry that are sitting in my hallway. Just walked past, I was like, oh God.
That's okay.
So I wanted to talk with you
for
this new segment that I'm doing, which is a segment called Real Play. And it's a lot like what we did in Costa Rica when we did the Matrix, and you were my, real play / guinea pig to demonstrate that skill. And I thought you were such a good sport for doing it, and you're not my client, so I can do it with you. It's sort of this narrow range of how do I demonstrate these skills without it being a family member or a client, and who's one of those people that could do it. And so you were one of them.
Thank you for.
And there's a theme to this series where I'm breaking down wise effort into these 3 chunks. So one chunk is about curiosity. Another chunk is about getting flexible. And then the third sort of aspect of it has to do with taking wise action in your life. And I thought you would be a good place to start to explore curiosity and demonstrate this one way in which we can practice curiosity of looking at some of our problems.
Cool. And I saw, I listened to your podcast with Isa on Real Play. And so I kind of get a little bit what it's about. And I thought it was great.
You're like, I'm not going that far.
No, that's okay.
She was a friend.
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's okay. I'm here.
Yeah.
And, I'm here to participate.
Awesome. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about who you are, and if you have something that you feel like you want to work on in this way, that you know how I work, that maybe you could bring to the table.
Yeah.
To get some movement around. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm in Toronto. I'm not in beautiful California like you, Diana. But I grew up here. My dad is from Hong Kong. My mom's from Taiwan. I am a lawyer during my day job, and specifically in commercial litigation. It obviously involves a lot of public speaking, and I didn't think that that's where I was going to be because I hate the attention and I don't really like public speaking. But one of the things that I've learned and I am learning is to work with the fear in that moment. I also have a dog at home. He's a mutt. He's a retriever, husky, German Shepherd, and he's from a native reserve in northern Manitoba. And I'm very lucky to have him.
What's his name?
Henry.
Henry.
A little old man name for a young pup.
Oh, it's so cute. Yeah, I used to have a retriever shepherd mix, and it's such a cool combo. They're super athletic. I don't know if your dog is very athletic, but mine is super athletic, like could swim through amazing waves, and then also really bonded and sweet and all of that.
Yeah,
he's a good combination.
Yeah, he's exactly like that. He'll like jump in the air and sort of do a backflip, and he's jumped into the water when it's freezing in the wintertime here. And it's no big deal.
Yeah. It's super cool to see your dog be so badass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally it is.
You feel like it's an extension of you. You take credit. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good. Well, Henry, I hope Henry's staying warm and cozy with you today. And do you have, when we were in Costa Rica, you did a matrix with me. And we're not going to do the matrix today. I want to do something else that is exploring a problem from biopsychosocial perspective. It's a practice of getting curious about one of your problems in your life and all the different potential factors that are contributing to it. And even just doing that, it's sort of like if you were to build a house, you'd have an architect come in and they would map out all the different parts, everything from the plumbing system to the foundation to the different rooms to the landscape, right? And that helps the builder with the design and how you may build this unique house. We can do that with this type of, it's called network modeling, of looking at one of our problems from all these different perspectives, from the biological perspective, from a psychological perspective, from a social cultural and interpersonal perspective, and a contextual perspective. And one of the complaints about psychology is that we haven't done that in the past, right? We've left a lot of these other parts out. It's like we haven't even looked at the plumbing, right? So I would think it'd be kind of interesting to take something maybe in your life that we could map out in this way and take a look at it in a curious way. And it may actually help you with it because you may choose different types of interventions or approaches with something that you haven't chosen before because you have a different view in on it. So given that, is there something that you would want to work on?
Yeah, I would want to work on vulnerability. And this point ties into both my personal life and into my work. I had mentioned earlier from a work perspective, one of the things that I'm learning is like working with the fear instead of against it. And I find that fear in my personal life will prevent me from being vulnerable and more open. So yeah, that's the topic and the way you make.
Okay. So vulnerability is sort of is where you want what you want more of, what you want to be practicing. And you see maybe the problem. I don't know if the problem is fear. The problem is probably related to how you relate to fear when it shows up.
Right.
The nature of being vulnerable is that it usually will come with fear.
Right.
In the physical world or in the emotional world. And then you said this shows up for you in work and
also in my personal life, especially in my close personal relationships where I'm not always vulnerable and I'm not always showing that side of myself for a number of reasons.
Okay. If we were to, could we choose one, either your personal or your work life, just for the sake of simplifying it?
Absolutely.
And then whilst we're doing this network?
Yeah.
So which one would you want to work with?
Dealer's choice, and you're the dealer.
Well, which would have the biggest bang for your buck for you in your life? If you were more vulnerable in your personal world, do you feel like it would open up potentially you to be more vulnerable in your work world or vice versa?
Yeah, for sure.
It sort of is a generalizable skill to some degree.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let's start with personal.
Personal?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to be just like an architect that draws out plans. I'm going to be using a piece of paper, just a blank piece of paper.
Okay.
And I'm going to be drawing out your network. And if you have a piece of paper, it might be helpful for you to do this.
I have.
With me.
Yes, I do. We're totally paperless now, and I'm in the office today. And so the one scrap piece of paper I have, I'm going to write on the back.
I have this problem all the time with clients. I'm like, let's write that out, but I have no pen. And no, we do not have pens in our house except for markers, like kids markers. Pentel.
Same.
Okay. So in the middle of this, I'm gonna say the circle in the middle, which is sort of the problem, and putting the problem in your words or the words that you used is that I have fear that gets in the way of vulnerability in my personal life. Is that how you would describe it? Or do you want to add more to that?
I think in line with that fear is the fear of being seen as weak, the fear of being seen as imperfect. Those are the two. I think those are the two main things.
Yeah. Okay. So fear of being seen as weak and fear of being seen as imperfect in your personal life. And gosh, I imagine that would show up in work as an attorney.
Totally.
Not like you work in an environment that welcomes a lot of weakness or imperfection.
Exactly.
Commercial law.
Right. Exactly.
Commercial litigation.
Exactly.
Okay. So as in any network or any system, there's a lot of different things that are interacting with this. And one way to look at it is that there's psychological factors, and psychological factors are how you relate to your feelings, how you relate to your thoughts, your own inner motivation, your sense of self, is an important one. And then actually how you are behaving when that fear shows up. And then there's social cultural factors, how you're relating to others. And then there's biological factors. And then there's contextual factors, right? I want to start with just the biological ones to just get a sense if there's anything biological that may be contributing to this fear. And some of the biological factors may be things like you're not getting enough sleep, your diet might be off and it makes you more anxious, you are changing medications, you use substances that make you feel more anxious, like high levels of caffeine. How are you doing with movement, sleep, exercise,
Yeah.
all that?
Yeah, Diana, sleep really resonates for me, and it's the big one. I didn't used to know this, but sometimes when I'm feeling extra anxious or stressed or I'm stuck in my head, I immediately ask myself how much sleep I got the night before or what the quality of my sleep is. And usually that's the key issue that drives a lot of my mood.
Yeah, for a lot of us is sleep is that's the time when everything gets consolidated, our brain gets to restore itself back to a level of being able to handle all this stuff the next day. And when you say it's either interrupt, poor quality, or not enough, what's getting in the way of you getting enough sleep? Is it you not going to bed? Is it you just can't sleep? You have time limitations in the morning?
Yeah, I find it's often that I have too much on my mind before I go to bed. It's not really the time I go to bed. I try to go to bed around the same time every evening. But if I've had a really busy day from a work perspective or a personal perspective, and I have more the next day, I just can't stay asleep for the full time that I'm there. And I'll wake up multiple times a night. And when I do wake up in the morning, I just don't feel refreshed at all.
Okay. Is there sort of a bodily stress state that's related to that?
Yes.
Like your body is revved
Yes.
as well?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
My body
Okay.
feel like I don't have stillness in my body.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm adding to our network is those two really important biological things that are related. So you have sleep, which is like poor quality.
Mhm.
There's actually three things in here, but I'm holding one of them. So sleep is poor quality, and then you also have body stress.
Right.
And I want you to put those two circles on your network. And each one of these circles contributes to the problem, right? So it contributes to the fear. So you could draw arrows contributing to that, but they also relate to each other.
Agreed.
Because what you said is I have this bodily stress that relates to me having a hard time sleeping. Like I just have too much, I'm revved and I can't go to sleep at night. And then maybe the next day I feel more anxious and more fearful. And then it can become a little bit of a vicious cycle, right? You have
Totally.
the stress on your body, which impacts your sleep, which then impacts the fear.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned something else, which is important because it's a good demonstration of how the biological stuff that's happening in our body relates to the psychological stuff. Because you said, I have too much on my mind.
Yeah.
Which is a psychological thing. That's not a, necessarily a bodily thing.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about that, like the too much on your mind.
You're right. I'm trying to clear my mind so that I don't feel the stress in my body. But I think the more that I try to do that and try to clear my mind, the more I feel the stress in my body. And then you think, okay, you know what? I need this many hours of sleep. I need to get up the next day. These are all the things. And you start making lists in your head, right? Of all the things that you're not good at, all the things that you need to get done tomorrow, and then the ways that I'm going to counteract my exhaustion the next day from not sleeping. So maybe I'll say, instead of doing my 20 minutes of yoga in the morning, you know what, I'll just cut through that and I'll sleep a little bit extra. And it creates this vicious cycle. And as you said, and then I also need a little bit more caffeine in the morning.
Okay, which is another bodily thing, caffeine. Okay, so I'm going to put all of these on our network. And we haven't even gotten to like the deeper, vulnerable psychological stuff. We'll get there. But this is the vicious cycle that so many of us are in.
Yeah.
I don't even know where the chicken or egg is. Is like, was I stressed first, or did I create the stress by all my attempts to get rid of the stress?
Exactly. We're constantly trying to problem solve in our head, right? And it becomes this like little circle.
Yeah, this little circle. So I put on my network thoughts, too much on my mind, in one circle, which is one of those psychological factors. And then what you do when those thoughts show up, which is try to clear my mind, make lists, think about all the things that I'm not done with, and plan for how I'm going to cut corners to get more.
Yeah.
And usually the things we cut corners with are the very things that we need. Like, I'll just cut out that 20-minute yoga practice tomorrow so I can deal with the stress, right? Which actually is the thing that could potentially help you with the stress, but you don't have time.
Agreed.
So we have all that. You have your thoughts, and then all the stuff that you're doing to try and, like, the thoughts that show up, and the stuff that you're trying to do to manage the poor sleep and the stress.
Right.
And like you said, it's this vicious cycle. So we have the category of biology, and then we have the category of psychology. And in psychology includes what we do with our thoughts and our behaviors.
Right.
And the behavior is the, not doing the yoga and the drinking a little more caffeine.
Right. Right.
Which then feed back into our biology.
Right.
Okay. Let me see your network, what it looks like. Is it can look like a complete mess, but it's as long as you have it on there.
Yeah. It's a bit of a mess. Good. There are arrows everywhere.
There's arrows everywhere.
You're related.
Okay. Yeah. So each of these circles are like nodes. And we could even stop here. Like, we could be like, okay, that's 17 minutes of our time together. We're going to stop today.
Right.
And you would already have some clear places where you could intervene.
Right.
And you know yourself. I mean, you've also been to a week-long ACT and yoga retreat.
I have.
So you have some skills.
I do.
Let's pause here, because I mean, we haven't even gotten to the fear and vulnerability. We're just working on the stress stuff, and the body stuff. But where would be some places that you would potentially even intervene within this cycle? What have you tried, or maybe even haven't tried, that you think might be helpful?
One of the things that I've tried, using one of the techniques you mentioned during our week in Costa Rica together, ACT, part of it is about acceptance. And so recently I just came off a 3-week trial and, had lots of sleep issues during that period, as you can imagine. And when I couldn't sleep at night, instead of ruminating and going through this cycle of thoughts, I would just say, you know what, I accept the fact that I can't sleep right now. And it is what it is. It's easier said than done. The other thing that I have used, one of my friends, a surgeon and, super high pressure job, and also sometimes can't sleep. And she said one of the techniques she uses is to say that, when she's lying in bed, she says to herself, you know what, I'm awake, but I'm luxuriating in this experience of being in a warm bed and awake. And I found that that's been really comforting for me.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You are so good in so many ways. So you just came up with the foundation of sleep intervention, is the newer kind of cognitive behavioral approach to insomnia, CBTI, which is, 1, stop trying to make yourself sleep.
Yeah.
The more you try and make yourself sleep, the less likely you're going to sleep. And so you are using that practice of acceptance. Like, I accept that I can't sleep right now. It is what it is. That is the reality. I'm going to stop trying so hard to make myself sleep.
Right.
And that in itself will probably increase the probability of you sleeping, but then you can't even think that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not saying this to make me sleep.
Yes, I know. I'm not helping myself sleep right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will make the suggestion that if after 20 minutes of lying in bed, you really just don't fall asleep, then get out of bed. I mean, you could choose, I really like that I'm luxuriating in my warm bed right now because I'm choosing to do something else and enjoy what I have.
Right.
And if that doesn't feel luxurious, because sometimes when we can't sleep enough, like it's been repetitive, not being able to sleep, our bed actually becomes kind of aversive. We're like, oh, I don't like being in my bed anymore. It's like, I don't know, it reminds me of not sleeping.
Right.
So you actually could remove yourself and go put yourself in a like a quiet place and do something quiet. Like, if I'm not going to sleep, what else would I do? I'm going to read a little bit of something that I haven't been able to read, or, whatever that I could actually even do that 20 minutes of yoga that I'm not going to do tomorrow morning.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Feel some right now. Yeah. But those two practices are spot on. And what I'd like for you to do is write them and put them in boxes.
Okay.
And one box, you said, I accept that I can't sleep. It is what it is. And that to me feels like a box that could impact those thoughts of
Yeah.
too much on my mind, or the thoughts of instead of making lists and all the things that I haven't done.
Right.
And same with the other box, which is luxuriating in a warm bed, is another place to put your attention.
Yeah.
So it's a shift of attention from worrying. And what we know about worrying is that it also doesn't improve the chances of the bad things not happening, but it shifts your attention to almost also to your body. So luxuriating in a warm bed, you're feeling the blankets, you're feeling the warmth, you're enjoying what's around you. And all of a sudden you're not in your head worrying, you're in your body. And the more that you're in your body, the probably the greater chances that you'll also be able to fall asleep.
Right.
But don't do it for that reason.
Yeah, I know. Well, you describing being in bed with the blanket, it makes me feel, it's the afternoon right now, but it makes me feel so
Yeah.
cozy and want to climb into bed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And we can actually activate the soothing part of our nervous system by just through that type of imagery. Just like we can activate the sympathetic fear-based nervous system through scary imagery, we can do the same thing with soothing, cozy imagery. So I love your surgeon friend. Surgeon?
You, surgeon, yeah. Yeah, she's a
Cool.
craniofacial surgeon. So she does cosmetic surgery for kids.
Oh my gosh, cosmetics. Yeah. So she's got a job that it really does matter if she does a good job or not.
100%. Yeah.
Like
100%.
high stakes job.
Exactly.
Yeah, that'll keep you up at night
Yeah, it will. Yeah.
for sure. And how do you wind yourself down? So those are two fantastic interventions. So put those down as squares.
Yep.
And then you can put some arrows to where those squares may work on your network. I also think it would work on the body stress.
Yeah, agreed. I think it would work for all the circles I've had so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a bit about, some of the biological things that could contribute to this fear of being seen as weak and imperfect, which is like sleep. The more you have problematic sleep and stress, the more likely those feelings show up. And then we've talked a little bit about thoughts that impact sleep in itself. But let's talk about some of the psychological factors that actually impact this fear of being seen as weak and imperfect. And one place I would probably want to start with you is the psychological factor that's associated with the sense of self. Because in there, you're talking about weak or imperfect and sort of like this quality about, if you were to have that quality and that were to define you, that in some way you would be bad, or you'd be defined by that. And that if you're vulnerable, so to me, it just like gives me a sense of like, oh, she's basing her sense of self on this perception of how she may be judged by others.
Yes.
But tell me a little bit about if that resonates for you.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the sense of self and not being seen as perfect or being seen as weak started from my childhood when my parents split up, and we grew up in a community where this was very unusual for two Chinese parents, especially, given their backgrounds and the social status of people around us. And, they said all sorts of things about, kids of single parents. Things like, your kids are going to become drug addicts if you guys get divorced. They're never going to make it through school. And so at that point in time, I was a teenager, and I was like, you guys for saying that about my parents and especially my mom. So I decided that I was just going to do really well in school. I was going to kick butt. I was going to be the model kid that my parents could be proud of. And I was going to change the way that people perceived my family. So I think that really carried on into my adulthood, and I carried on some of the stigma and insecurity of my parents not being together into many of my personal relationships as well. So I always feel like I had this sense that I needed to perform for love, even through my marriage with my ex-husband. And it's something that I've been working on this past while. So that's the psychological part.
Yeah. There's so much packed in there, and there's sociocultural
100%. 100%
too. You said that, parents, the kid of single parents, there was judgment about you. And then you had this like rebellion. So like, F you to all the those that were judging you. But just tell me more about, also how being seen as weak or imperfect may relate to what it was like for you as a kid to Chinese parents.
So I grew up with two Chinese parents who were very loving and pretty open-minded, I would say. But at the same time, if I would run into emotional issues, the our what we were used to in our family was not letting the outside world know that. And even later on, when I became an adult, this is a longer story and a separate one, but it's an example of the social cultural element. But when one of my really good friends committed suicide and I wanted to go to therapy, one of my parents was like, I really don't think you should do that. You're in law school. There might be a stigma to this. Um, and that's kind of the way that I grew up and I internalized it. I also felt like I needed to present well for my family and I couldn't show any emotional weakness.
Yeah. So it's also considering your family's reputation.
Exactly.
It's not just about you, it's also about the reputation of your family and your parents. So
Exactly.
you're carrying that extra important load. I mean, it's maybe a value system within your family of
Exactly.
I'm responsible for my parents, not just me.
Exactly.
If I show a weakness.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And
then I imagine there's like a tension between that because there might have been a part of you that wanted to go to therapy or needed that. But then how do I navigate that without being judged or that looking poorly on my family?
Yeah, Diana, you're spot on. I had this, I had this feeling that I should really side with my family and do what I felt they thought was right. But at the same time, I'm also a very deeply emotional and sensitive person. And I'm also quite expressive. And so it was this tension between these two sides and how I handle these very difficult moments in my life and in my family's life.
Mm. Okay. Good. So our network just got a whole lot richer beyond I can't sleep because I'm stressed.
We need like 5 pages now.
Yeah, we need 5 pages. You should see I'm writing all this stuff down. And I want to just say in this network holds your beliefs about yourself and who you are based on your early childhood experience, right? So being a kid of single parents and sort of feeling judged by others. So I would say, there may be a node there which has to do with your sense of self as like myself is also defined by what other people believe about me.
Yes.
And then there's also another aspect to yourself that myself is also defined by my parents. So the self that is related to your parents and in that interconnection that you have with them and the responsibility
Exactly.
you feel to them. So we could say responsibility for family in there. And these are all self components of your psychology.
Right.
Like, who am I?
Right. Right.
Am I defined by other people's judgment of me?
Right.
Am I defined by my relationship to my parents?
Right.
And then there was also in there some behaviors that came out of those. So another part of psychology, behaviors, and the behavior of performing. Can you say more about that one?
Yeah, the specific example I think of is, because my parents had separated when I was young, and I didn't realize this until later on, but I obviously carried some kind of insecurity from that and the way people perceived my family. And I decided when I was married that I needed to have like the perfect household. Everything needed to be in place, like beautiful furniture, things a certain way, a certain type of house, and to project a certain type of aesthetic. And it wasn't really about the materialism. It was to be like, you know what? I still turned out okay. And, this idea of this concept of like this perfect family, which of course doesn't exist, but for me provided some armor for the way I really felt inside about me, the way I felt about my marriage, which was, falling apart at the time. It was there to sort of protect me.
Yeah. So good. So you have in there the feeling of insecurity, and then you have the perfection that is there to kind of cover up and contain
Exactly.
that insecure part of you.
Exactly.
And that insecure part of you has its roots, way, way, way old roots within this early experience within your family and within your culture, and how you navigated that. You had to kind of like do the FU and
Right.
I'm gonna take control of
Right.
this thing.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It was interesting because I before you came on the retreat, I don't do this with my clients, but I do this with people coming on my retreats. I Googled you and
I have a story.
you
Love it.
of the folks that were coming on the retreat, you were one of the ones I was most like, oh gosh, I don't know how she's going to do with this. Like all the profile of the attorney, the headshot. I mean, your headshot is like this woman is like
It's
killing it in the professional world, and the website. And then you showed up and you were so warm and natural and organic and building friendships. And I can see how that it's like that shell of perfection that is on the outside to protect the more tender,
yeah.
like you said, the more emotional, tender, vulnerable self that's there.
Yeah. Totally.
And yeah, I kind of like the dichotomy. I think it's interesting. It makes you interesting to have that dichotomy. It's not that we need to get rid of that shell, but I would imagine if that shell is what's dominating your experience with your friends or in the
Right.
work setting,
Right.
it does lead to, difficulty with connecting.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. I realized a few years ago that some of my really close friends had also never seen me cry. And so, that said something. And you saw a lot of tears from me when I was in Costa Rica. So it was a warm, welcoming space.
Yeah. Yeah, that for some reason that part of you was able to come out more and be, like hair in a bun, kind of a mess,
Totally.
where, like just in like hanging out in your bathing suit, like all those things that um I won't post any of those pictures because but it's so different, right? Than the very contained attorney,
Yeah.
like had to take all of this stuff that happened for you and put it in a nice package so that it's contained.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the sense of self. We also have the social cultural influences there. I'm going to have you put some of those nodes down
Yeah.
to help you and how they relate to each other, because I see like the insecure self and then the self that is there to take care of your parents' reputation, your family reputation.
Hmm.
And then we would see behaviors that are perfectionistic behaviors, performing for love,
Yeah.
and then maybe feelings that are insecure. So those would be the nodes that I would add. So if we were to pause on some of these more psychological factors, and there's history there and sociocultural factors, what have you learned about yourself in terms of what helps you when that insecurity shows up, or what helps you when you feel like I need to perform for love, or when the perfectionism shows up? And you can even use some of the things that you learned on our retreat, some of the practices, but I imagine you also have your own knowings.
Yeah, one of the things that I realize that I do when I'm feeling this way is that I hold my breath. And I noticed that on this retreat, even though I wasn't doing my, every morning when I'm in Toronto, I meditate. And even though I wasn't meditating like I was in Costa Rica, like I would here, I felt like when I was there, I could breathe in the mornings because of the activities we were doing. And we were usually doing some type of yoga to start off the day. And I found that that's been really helpful for me. The second thing that I found that's helpful is I try to use that fear or the insecurity to my advantage. That's maybe not the right way to explain it, but I try to step into it, and I use that. I'm going to use it. I'm going to use this in a work context and maybe not in a
Mm-hmm.
personal. But even to this day, before I get up and get on stage in court, I still feel super nervous. I can't sleep the night before, and I used to let that fear really get to me. And I found what was really helpful for me is in the few moments before I'm going to get up, I visualize myself up there and I visualize myself speaking. And I tell myself to breathe and be present. And once I'm up there, I use the fear as this adrenaline to like the energy just takes over the room. And it's just the judge and the witness and me.
So good.
Yeah.
Uh, you're such a natural of being able to find pathways to work with these very human experiences of feeling insecure or having shame around, aspects of ourselves. And So the first one is the breath. And you notice that when insecurity shows up, you do what most of us do, which is tighten up around it and hold our breath because we're scared. And how much being able to breathe and slowing down the breath and having an abundance of long, slow breaths helps you regulate that nervous system that's scared,
Right.
and maybe be present as well.
Exactly.
And there is something about Costa Rica where you just can't help but breathe because
Exactly.
there's so many trees and there's so much, it feels like so much space and so much, you don't feel congested. You feel like there's just air moving constantly
Exactly.
through us, versus our office buildings or our,
Exactly.
it's just different. And then this other part, which I think is a really good example of you stepping into another version of yourself with the insecurity. So we can have a feeling, and then we can have many versions of ourself that hold that feeling, right? So we can have insecurity, and then there's a version of me that shrinks away and wants to hide and makes myself small and uses words like, yeah, sort of, kind of, I'm sorry, but, right?
Right.
And then there's a version of ourself that feels insecure and is like, I'm putting myself on a stage like a musician that's getting out there and has all this energy it's almost like a confidence with the vulnerability.
Exactly.
And that's a super cool edge to ride. If you can ride it, you actually, you're more likable. Definitely. People that show a little bit of vulnerability with putting themselves into big spaces are what the research shows is they're very likable. But it also makes you feel empowered. Like the visualization of that version of you before you get out there. And you could use that same visualization before you go into a relationship.
Right.
Or even now, like I'm sensing that part of you is kind of maybe here doing this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was going to say, one of the things that we talked about in Costa Rica that feeds into what I was just explaining is you talked about, the fact that this is not about feeling better. It's about feeling better, which means accepting how we are feeling and not pushing that away. And I found that concept has been really helpful to me, both in moments like this where I have to perform, and then when I have to do scary things in interpersonal relationships.
Great. It's about feeling better, getting better at feeling.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's put some of those boxes in.
Okay.
And those will be boxes that intervene and help you with the insecure self, helps you with the perform, like you're using performance for love. Instead of using performance for love, you're loving through your performance. You're putting yourself out there first. And then this other, this fierce version of you that's brave, like the brave you, right? That's a different self that's showing up.
Right.
So I hear breathing. What would you want to call that version of you that's like brave, that shows up in the court, or visualize her?
I think a brave or courage. That's the word that sort of comes to mind. Or working with the fear, but that's many words.
Yeah. It's like Henry in those waves.
Yes, totally. Jumping into
like that Henry version of you that's like, I'm just going to get out there and be strong. And
exactly.
Do a somersault. Exactly. Okay. And then getting better at feeling. This is me getting better at feeling. The bigger the feeling, the more I have an opportunity to get better at feeling.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that opening to feeling. Mm-hmm. Those will be some of your boxes of interventions.
All right. I'll have that.
And there's lots of other pieces. We're not going to be able to get to all of the network here. But there's two other pieces I want to explore for you. One is motivation. And so motivation is another psychological component within ourselves that drives us to do these hard things, like, the work that you do, but in friendships. Why would you want to be more vulnerable in your friendships? Why does it matter to you?
Because I want more intimacy in my life. I want more authenticity, not just out of myself, but out of other people. And I find that if I can be vulnerable and I can be authentic, despite people thinking that, I just have this really tough and intense exterior, as you saw from my headshot, that gives other people space as well to be vulnerable and to share with me. And that feels truly like a gift when people can do that with me.
Can you tell me about a time, an experience where you've had that feeling of intimacy and this exchange of authenticity where they get to have it and you get to have it too?
Yeah. So I recently, um, I was speaking with one of my friends who I found out had been sexually abused when she was young. And I sort of knew that that had happened, but she didn't come out and, right out tell me. But I know that that led to so many things and decisions in her life that she felt were unhealthy. That was sort of the root cause. So I shared some things in my life that I had done um, during a time when I had gone through trauma myself. And I'm thinking of, in particular, like 2 suicides that I went through and all the things I did to numb out my emotions during that time and not to feel things. So I shared that with her before asking her what had happened with her. And I think that that gave her the space to tell me not only about the sexual abuse, but all the things that she did afterwards that she felt so much shame over. That hopefully she felt a little bit less shame, and I felt less shame about the stuff that I've done because we're human and we shared this like common experience in some ways together.
Yeah. Yeah. Such an example of how you being willing to open up was a gift to her,
Right.
to open up, and then you start to feel safer with the stuff that feels really unsafe when you are just alone with it.
Exactly. Exactly.
So being alone with your own with memories of sexual abuse, or being alone with memories of someone you cared about committing suicide, is like, those are dark places to go to.
Exactly.
So the you being willing to do that, which is showing the imperfections or what some would consider weakness, and others that are maybe those that value authenticity and bravery, I actually see that as incredibly strong,
Right.
to not just gloss over something or say like, yeah, I get it, and change the subject, but actually to go into it. And you did it in a very skillful way too, where you didn't just ask her to start opening up.
Right.
You opened up first.
Right. Well, we did this activity when we were in Costa Rica. You might remember where one of us was acted as the therapist, just listening to what the other person was saying. The other person was, I guess, our patient, and we didn't have the opportunity to reciprocate that. The person just gets to be the therapist and listen, and the patient just gets to talk. And that experience of just being able to hear somebody else's pain and hear somebody else's story, right, is so powerful.
Yeah. Well, I remember that because when I did that exercise, I didn't switch sides. Like the person that shared the story
Yes.
to their perceived therapist then didn't get the chance to switch and be the therapist.
Mhm.
And those that shared the story felt this feeling like, wait, no, I got so much help from my therapist. It's not fair to my therapist.
Right.
And were you the therapist in that example,
Yes,
or the client?
no, I was the
You were
therapist.
the therapist.
Yeah,
And what all the therapists said, quote therapists, they're just general, people that were acting as therapists, what they all said was, no, that was so helpful for me to
exactly,
be able to be the receiver of your story.
exactly,
Like, it was so moving. And I feel like I got so much out of it,
exactly.
which is my experience all the time, obviously, as a therapist. But we don't get that. We don't understand that
Right.
just receiving
Yes,
is a gift.
yes, without
Yeah.
trying to fixing. And, when we were at this retreat, we bore witness to so many people's stories, and we weren't trying to solve their problems or make them feel better. And it was just bearing witness. And that was so powerful.
So I will say that's a motivation for you. That's a value of yours. If that's one of the things that you took away
Yeah,
and you were touched and moved by, there's so many other things. There's so many things to remember about what happened there.
right.
But that's the one that you're like, oh, that thread. And that's what was also happening with my friend.
Mm.
And when you have a sense of, okay, that is, sometimes our motivations are also just remembering what it felt like to be in that pair dialogue with the person that you shared with. Who was your partner?
Rebecca.
Rebecca. Okay, yeah. So Rebecca, she's another awesome. So she's a doctor,
Yeah.
so
DUI or something.
another
Big
powerhouse.
deal. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So these two powerhouse women, in this very vulnerable state, and just being there, and an attorney not fixing a doctor.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I know. Go figure, right? We want to fix everything. Yeah. It was beautiful.
So good.
That.
Yeah. So to bear witness, and we can think about your values as being, and the sort of that being the motivation that is I would say, well, that can help you with your insecurity, and that can help you with your body stress, and that can help you with, when you get caught up in this part of you that feels torn between, I should respect my parents and family and not go to therapy, and then I really need to go to therapy, right?
Right.
I want to bear witness
Right.
for others and for myself. And part of that is the values that will motivate me to be vulnerable,
Mm. Yeah.
even when it's uncomfortable,
Yeah.
because I see and have felt in my life the experience of bearing witness
Right.
and the power of it.
Right. Thank you. No, that's also a gift because I didn't realize that this is one of my values. I realized this is something that's important to me, but I never framed it as a value. So I'm gonna take that away and think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Not to give you your values, but I was noticing it
Yeah, and I
potentially
think
as a potential value. Yeah.
yeah,
You take it away
yeah,
and see if it fits. You try it on for you.
thank you.
Okay. We didn't get to everything here. So there are other aspects of your network that I would be interested in is just sort of like contextual things. Like who are the people that you're trying to be friends with, and in what context are you building this vulnerability? Right. So may have a greater chance of having vulnerable, intimate relationships, being able to share and cry with a friend if you're doing something like going for a hike or hanging out at each other's house than you would maybe at a bar or at like a event where you have to be more of the, perfect self.
Right.
And so there's all sorts of contextual factors that influence your ability to be vulnerable. And do you feel like you have enough of those going on in your life, like spaces to be
Yeah.
vulnerable?
So it's interesting. I didn't realize this until you just mentioned this, but after Costa Rica, I have been having difficult conversations with people while we're on walks instead of going to a bar for drinks. And it was a really unconscious thing. And I wasn't sure why. But now that you've said it, I don't have to perform in that moment, right? For a waiter, I don't have to look at a certain way at a certain restaurant. And I can just be in that moment with like nature around me that somehow makes me feel safer than if I'm at a loud bar, talking to someone over drinks.
Totally. That context of going for a walk with a friend versus, other contexts, it does makes a big difference. And our environment just influences so much of what version of us feels like they can show up
Yeah.
for different reasons.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another thing for you to think about. There's a bit of a map here of all, and we haven't gotten to all of it, but a start of things that are influencing the fear that gets in the way of being vulnerable
Right.
in your relationships.
Right.
And we didn't even get to unpacking some of these thoughts, like what to do, how to diffuse thoughts and all the other things.
Right.
But we have some boxes here that you came up with that are good ones. I can accept this. It is what it is. Can I luxuriate and savor whatever moment I'm in?
Yeah.
If I'm in my bed,
Yeah.
working with your breath, allowing yourself to breathe, allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling. And then this brave self, like this courageous Henry self, whatever you want
I love
to call,
I love that.
embodying your dog
I love
energy,
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
and how to work with that perfectionism with remembering what your values really are,
Yeah.
which have to do more with bearing witness than being the perfect witness.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So as we close, any thoughts on just thinking about it this way, networking it this way, what it was like for you? Not that we solved anything, but just explored this landscape.
So two things come to mind. I think that the fact that, again, we didn't solve anything per se here, but the fact that we explored this and I'm having this open discussion with you about this somehow has lifted this weight inside of me. And I just feel a little bit lighter for this moment. And that's like quite beautiful. And I want to savor that afterwards. The second part of it is that I don't think I drew the link between, biological things like the sleep, for example, all the way to, performance and perfectionism. I mean, it makes sense that they're related, but to see them like visually on a map like this, and to see how some of the habits that I have now help me to work with those situations. Yeah, it's powerful. I need to think about that.
It is a good example of sometimes just stepping back and looking at how all these different things are related also makes you feel a little bit less like, no wonder I haven't been able to figure this out. It's not that simple.
No, I know it's not that simple.
I find that relieving when we see how complicated we really are, and that there's so many different factors that are contributing to this struggle that I have. And it's so old. Usually it's so old, and it's like maybe even started before I was born. And maybe there's one piece that I could target And I actually know some things that I've tried that have worked, and maybe I could keep on practicing those things to target this piece, and it could start to just shift the network a little bit
Right.
and open it up
Right.
somewhere.
Right. Right. Yeah, I love the idea of sharing this with a friend or someone who I want to develop more intimacy with. I'm a very visual learner as well. And so it's like almost a fun little game that we get to play together, but to deepen our relationship.
Yeah. Network a problem.
Yeah.
Well, I will, at the end of this, after we're done, I'm going to walk people through kind of what we did. I'll give a little bit more concrete how they could try it at home. And, but it was fun for you to just jump in and do it this with me. This is the first time I've done it with somebody live. So it was a good challenge for me as well. And I appreciate how much just you brought of yourself. You were so open and vulnerable in practicing everything that you want to practice
Thank
with
you.
friends. So you're doing it here.
Thank you. No,
Good job.
thank you for
Yeah.
having me. And I think you've always, I've met you in person and I'm obviously seeing you again. And you've always made me feel really comfortable and that I'm in this space and you're holding space for me. And so that's the way I was able to do that today.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Okay, back to your busy life in Toronto.
Thank you. I'm off to a summer party, so it's a different.
Okay, you don't have to get your suit back on. Okay,
exactly.
Good. Well, I'm glad you're done with your trial too.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Take
Thank
care.
you so much. Nice to see you, Diana.